Okay, welcome to our video on the Civil War Part 2, 1861 to 1865. Alright, we have a lot of things to discuss today. Let's start with the Confederates deciding to gamble and invade North twice. They actually decided to invade North twice to prove to the world that the Confederacy could survive as an independent nation. The South had hoped that the invasion to North would yield a foothold in Union territory, so of course, because all the battles have been taken down in the South. Great Britain and other countries, they were hoping to recognize by them as a country on its own. The result would be that those nations could provide military support for the Confederacy. So they invade North two different times. One's in Antietam, the second time is the Battle of Gettysburg. McClellan learns of Lee's plan. The first time Lee decided to go up north, by a random chance, a Union soldier found Lee's battle plan. Just kind of boom, ran into him, wrapped in a bundle of 3 cigars. Even though McClellan knew of the plan, he was very cautious because he believed that Lee had a larger force. The army met near was a place called Sharpsburg in Maryland. That's one of the big problems with McClellan, is that he always believed the other side was bigger and stronger and more powerful than he was, which was not always true. The battle began in the morning of September 17th. Union troops led by the General Fighting Joe Hooker made several advances against Lee near the Hagerstown Pike. Close to the battle was Dunkerque Church. Between the church and the Union army was a large cornfield where hundreds of soldiers were slaughtered. In a Confederate-led counterattack, the rebels inflicted similar casualty on the Union. By 10 a.m., more than 8,000 men were killed or wounded. This is the single bloodiest day of the Civil War. More people died during this particular battle of the Civil War in the Battle of Antietam than any other time. It was very, very bloody one-day battle. The second one was where the Confederate massacred in the second part of the battle. They used it as a rifle pit against the advancing Union troops. At first, the Confederates were able to kill many Union soldiers, but eventually the Union troops were able to overcome and gain a victory in the phase of the Battle of Antietam. Over 5,000 people died in this spot. In the afternoon, the third phase of the battle is when the Burnside's 12,000 men attacked the remaining Confederate forces near Sharpsburg. All the Burnside's forces outnumbered the Confederates by 30 to 1. The Confederates were able to hold the Union troops back. 3 hours were crucial as the Confederate troops brought another 3,000 reinforcements. Burnside sent word to McClellan to request more, but McClellan ever cautiously once again declined. In the fighting at what became known as Burnside's Bridge, over 2,300 Union soldiers were killed and 1,100 Confederate soldiers died. Even though the more Union troops died, because Lee retreated, McClellan claimed victory and is considered to be the victory for the Union. Statistics from this one: 9 times more Americans died at the Antietam, which is just quick battle, few hours, than the D-Day invasion during World War II, the bloodiest single day of World War II. The single-day battle included more casualties than the entire Revolutionary War, War of 1812, Spanish-American War combined. Deadly massacre on both ends. Antietam gave Lincoln the victory he needed to announce what is known as the Emancipation Proclamation. On September 2nd, 1862, he made the announcement that it would take effect on January 1st, 63. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free many slaves. For example, border states which had slaves were loyal to the Union were not affected because Lincoln was concerned that these states might leave. Also, the proclamation obviously did not have any effect on the Confederacy because they just refused to ignore them. It was not until the 13th Amendment was passed in 1865 that all slaves were given their freedom. 3 major reasons, the effects of the proclamation. Number 1, Union in the North. Many Northerners lost morale after a large number of captives in battle with a string of defeats suffered by the Union Army. This gave them cause. Second is the disunion in the South. The Confederacy relied on slave labor to maintain its farm as white males went to fight in the war. After slaves heard about it, many deserted, some revolted, which hurt the Southern economy. And third, it kept the England out. They gave up their slavery way before America did, and now they couldn't support South. How could you support South? Was fighting to keep slaves. So even though they wanted to support the South, it kept the British out of the war. Lincoln visited McClellan in Antietam in 1862 to convince him to fight, but no amount of convincing would take this cautious general to fight. So he was relieved and replaced by Burnside. Became the commander of what was known as the Army of the Potomac, the most powerful, biggest, well-equipped Union army of all time. McClellan eventually was nominated to be president by the Democratic Party in 1864, but he was soundly defeated by Lincoln. Fredericksburg is next. Burnside, who became the commander at this time, wanted to take the Confederate capital of Richmond. He planned to seize the town of Fredericksburg first, then take over. In order to do that, he needed to get a pontoon bridge to cross over. Burnside found himself waiting for 2 weeks for pontoons, which gave the lead and needed time to reinforce his troops and set his position to defend against Burnside's over 100,000 men coming in. Once the Union forces made it across the river, troops savagely looted the town of Fredericksburg. Union soldiers took delight in wearing clothes of local women who were unable to evacuate their belongings. The looting at the Fredericksburg was one of the worst in the war. Burnside ordered the Fighting Joe Hooker to attack the Heights in what known Union journalists believe was the murder, not warfare. Marye's Heights provided the Confederate troops the perfect position to shoot at Union troops, and it was a total massacre. The Irish Brigade fought on both sides during the war. Fredericksburg, fighting 69th, were the Irish immigrants from the north, in the Pennsylvania and New York. The Union Irish soldiers fought against the Irish soldiers of the south, the 24th Georgia Infantry and Phillips Regime. They got within 25 paces of each other before they were mowed down by the Georgian troops. Of the 1,200 men, 540 were killed during this battle. Next is Joseph Hooker. He replaced the Burnside and became a commander, who also was replaced. Eventually, Hooker was replaced 5 months later by Grant. First Conscription Act of 1863 comes along. Under the law, all men between the age of 20 and 45 were to sign up for military service. However, since military service could be avoided by paying a fee or finding a substitute, it was a poor choice, and a lot of the poor people ended up going, and there was a riot in New York. Next battle is General Hooker's Battle of Chancellorsville. 3 goals: force Lee out of his entrenchment at Fredericksburg, sever Lee's line of communication, and crush Lee's army through the pincer move, which means divide the army into 2, squeeze them from both ends. General Lee and his lieutenant generals executed a daring move that would stop the Union advance. He divided his force by sending 10,000 of his men back to Fredericksburg to convince Hooker that Lee was retreating if he fell for that, while Lee took the rest of his undersized army to attack Hooker's own flanks, which is either right or left side. Hooker decided to await reinforcement. His pause shifted the momentum of the battle to Lee's favor. Learning from the Confederate cavalry commander Stuart that Hooker's flank was vulnerable, Lee attacked, and Hooker was defeated. Jackson planned a sneak attack at this time to be able to defeat the one prong of the Union's divided troops. Hooker ordered the retreat of the others, which gave the Confederates a major victory at Chancellorsville. Unfortunately, Stonewall Jackson was shot by his own troop mistakenly at night. His arm was amputated, he caught pneumonia, and he died at Chancellorsville, which is devastating to Robert E. Lee. Next, Lincoln appoints George Meade. After Hooker's defeat at Chancellorsville, Lincoln appoints Meade, who's going to lead the Union Army at the Battle of Gettysburg. The Confederates had a string of victories, and believing a second invasion of North would be more successful than Antietam, they crossed into Pennsylvania into the town of Gettysburg. The Union position on day 1 at Gettysburg was saved by a Union cavalry commander named John Buford, who kept the Confederate forces west of town until the bulk of the supporting forces could assemble in town. Union soldiers retreated and occupied a strong position east and south of the town, which they had the advantage of the height. The high ground refers to the hill surrounding Gettysburg, and a fish hook refers to the shape of the Union lines during the battle. So you'll see this battle map. You see the shape of the fish hook shape, and they have the higher ground. Day 2, the Confederate plan was to strike at the left flank of the Union Army and an undefended hill known as the Little Round Top and surround the Union Army. Union reinforcements rushed to the Little Round Top, where after a vicious battle, the Confederate troops retreated and the Union held the high ground at Little Round Top. Devil's Den referred to a large group of rocks and boulders that was located almost directly east of the Union position at Little Round Top. During the second day battle, Confederate forces sought to remove the Union troops which held the position. After several hours of fierce and sometimes desperate fighting, Confederate troops took the position and deployed sharpshooters which fired at Union position around the Little Round Top. This resulted in a brutal slaughter of the Union troops. At this time, Colonel Chamberlain and the 20th Maine were the end of the line at Little Round Top. General Vincent ordered Chamberlain to hold the position at all hazard, at all costs, and his men were attacked in waves by the 15th Alabama. If the Confederate troops were able to get around Chamberlain, the entire flank of the Union Army might have caved in and they would lose the battle. The 20th Maine initiated a bayonet charge down Little Round Top against the 15th Alabama, which drove them back and won the day for the Union, and Chamberlain became a hero. Day 3, the final day of the battle, Lee believed an attack on the Union center line would be the most effective way of defeating the Union Army and winning the battle, not knowing that is the most heavily fortified, most strongest position of all Union line. Lee was advised by General Longstreet against making this attack. Longstreet believed they would fail because the Confederate troops had to first of all march over 1,000 yards of open ground. They'd be torn to pieces. The Confederate attack was stopped. They suffered high casualties, and Lee retreated the next day. And this attack is known as Pickett's Charge, under the command of General Pickett. And he basically lost his whole division in this day. Many months later, in Pennsylvania, Governor Corton invited Lincoln to come to dedicate the cemetery, which is about 17 acres of land. Lincoln was invited to give a few appropriate remarks. Lincoln probably accepted the invitation as an opportunity to explain his view. And this is what's known as Gettysburg Address. It's just one-time quick note that I was going to say. And by the way, that little picture on the left side with the little yellow arrow pointing, that is the only known picture of Lincoln at Gettysburg. 1603, Vicksburg city was strategically located in the bluff and Mississippi rivers. Lincoln believed that taking the city was pivotal to winning the war. Naval bombardment of the town had failed, and Lincoln assigned Grant to take the city by land. Grant attempted to seize Vicksburg several different ways, but it all failed. His next move was to cross the Mississippi River and hopefully capture Vicksburg. Over 3 weeks later, Grant's men crossed the river in 5 different battles, and he managed to surround the city, trapping 31,000 Confederate troops. Grant realized that they could not take the city itself, so he decided to lay a siege, surround it, constant bombardment, nothing goes in and out. The Confederates surrendered on July 3rd, 1863 at 10 o'clock, and the Union flag flew throughout the city on July 4th. After the surrender of the city of Vicksburg, the Stars and Stripes were flown from the county courthouse, and Vicksburg did not celebrate 4th of July for 81 years. At this time, African Americans recruited for the war. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton authorized the enlistment of black troops. Prior to the authorization, African Americans were not allowed to serve. As a result of the inclusion of the blacks in the military, many important Appalachians helped recruit soldiers, especially the 54th Massachusetts Regiment Volunteers. Was founded. It was all black Union soldiers, except all the officers were white. They're established by the governor, John Andrew, who appointed 24-year-old Robert Gould Shaw as a commander. And then the recruits included Frederick Douglass and Charles, and they started their camp training in 1863, February 21st. The famous Battle of Fort Wagner. The Union planned to siege Charleston, and it was one of the important forts that surround Charleston, South Carolina. General Quincy Gilmore decided that the harbor had to be opened up, and therefore Fort Wagner was selected as the first target for Union troops. There was actually many different forts around that area that eventually had to be taken. The fort was surrounded by swamp, ocean, and fortification, which made it difficult to penetrate by foot. It had a 14 cannon and a bomb-proof ceiling that could protect up to 1,000 different men. General Gilmore believed that a naval attack would destroy the resistance. The Union was initially successful at Morris Island, but this is different. 54th Massachusetts was sent in to seize the fort. However, more than one half the Union was killed, including Shaw. Other regiments were sent to capture Fort Wagner. However, they all suffered similar losses, and the plan was eventually abandoned. But more than anything else, the effect of the battle for Wagner for the 54th Massachusetts Regiment is that they show that colored troops can fight, and they have been successful, and they were willing to fight, and they were good soldiers. They proved to the world. Sergeant William Garney was wounded multiple times in assault and is awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, which is the highest award given to any American troops. More than 250 of the 54th Mass were killed in the assault on Fort Wagner. However, as word of the bravery spread, more and more African Americans joined. By the end of the war, there were over 180,000 black troops serving in the Union against the South. Battle of Chattanooga is next. The city was known as the key to East Tennessee and the gateway to the Deep South. 4 major railroad lines met at this point, so it was very important for them to capture it. There's two different battles that takes place within the Battle of Chattanooga. Missionary Ridge. The next day, I'm sorry. Let's look at the Lookout Mountain. The Hooker's troops crossed the Lookout Mountains, climbed the slopes, and looking down. And Hooker's men eventually able to plant stars and stripes on the mountain summit there. The next day, the Union Army attacked the Missionary Ridge and were victorious. This victory defeated the Confederate offensive threat in the west and allowed the Union to begin the campaign that ended in the taking of the Atlanta under General Sherman. Alright, we're just going to leave it here. I know it's a long video. There's so much to talk about. Don't forget to take your 5-question test, submit your hard question, and bring your summary.